Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Aidan O'Brien. Aidan is a coach, mentor and keynote speaker. His goal is to empower people to find their truth, master their emotions, develop new skills and transform into the most powerful versions of themselves. Aidan first stepped on stage as a speaker in 2007, has been speaking and mentoring ever since. For 15 years, he has traveled the world coaching individuals and live audiences on 5 continents, inspiring over 250,000 people and counting. I'm looking forward to talking all things confidence, self-doubt and mindset in general in today's episode. Aidan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian. That's some introduction there. Sometimes I forget half of that.
Mate, it's an introduction and I had to kind of keep it nice and short because we have a lot of topics we're going to cover today. I'm going to jump straight into what is a Pandora's box of a question and a loaded question on the front end. Right. But talk to us. This is your bread and butter. Talk to us about how we can build more confidence. This is something so many people struggle with, but this is well in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I think over the last couple of years as well, it's become a bigger issue because of the chaos and uncertainty in the world, right? There's been such troubled waters for the last 2 years in people's lives, such upheaval, which separately I think is a huge opportunity for people. That's why people are moving and making adjustments easier than ever. But really all of this stuff that's been brought up from the uncertainty has really created a lot of self-doubt, insecurity, in terms of people have more ideas and they have more clarity in some ways, but they don't necessarily have the confidence to go and do anything about it. So confidence is something that's a big issue, and it's not just with your average Joe, for lack of a better phrase. It's your senior level executives, it's your successful entrepreneurs and business owners. Confidence is a massive issue. And for me, there's a couple of things and lately I've had some new shifts in awareness around it. One of the first things is lack of clarity, I always say. People really don't know who they are. They know who they think they are, but they don't know who they really are. And without clarity, you can't have confidence. So when you start asking some new questions, who am I really? What do I want? Where am I going? Who do I want to become? When you start asking these questions and you find some answers from in here, not from up here, not from what you think, not from your story, not from who people who they believe you are, but who you truly are, answers from your body. Once you get that clarity, then you get more confidence because you feel there's a certain knowingness in who you are, what you want, where you're going, and it's much easier to take steps then and to stick with it. So that would be one, and we could dive into that. And I was going to give you 2 or 3 off the top, and you can kind of pick which one. But that's the first one, clarity, right? That's the first thing. The second thing then is people are living really today more than ever outside of themselves. Like there's a chapter in the book called Living Outside Yourself, because everything is so external. Everything we live for external. We're in this need mode or spend mode or distraction mode. The world is, it wants us separated from our truest self. It wants us spending. It wants us needing. And when we're living outside ourselves, all our energy is going this way. So when our energy is that way, we don't have confidence in ourselves then because we can't control it. We can't rely on it. It's uncertain again. And, we end up very insecure then because we're depending on external things. Right? So that would be a big issue, I think, today for people in terms of confidence. And the third one I'll give you, just to pick 3, why people lack confidence, is because people don't keep their word to themselves. And it's kind of connected to the second one. I mean, and partly it's connected to the first one too because they don't have clarity. But when you make promises to yourself and you try and shift behaviors and then you don't shift the behavior, you start to lose your belief in your own word. You can't rely on yourself. And if you can't rely on yourself, how are you supposed to have confidence? How are you supposed to have confidence in something else when you don't even believe in yourself? So they'd be kind of 3 things off the top that would be a big issue. And I think with keeping your word, I think that's a massive issue in men and women. But I've seen it, a lot of guys say how to be more masculine. The first step to becoming more masculine, fellas, is to do what you say you'll do. Keep your word, and not only to other people, but to yourself. And over time, you keep breaking the promises to yourself, you lose confidence. And that's what happens. It's like a bottle of water, you're stabbing it and the water's leaking out. You're leaking energy, you're leaking confidence all the time. And again, it's connected because people don't keep the word for themselves because they don't have clarity. They don't keep the word for themselves because they're depending on external things. So we want to bring it back to ourselves. We want to get clear on who we are, what we want, make a decision, and then we want to keep our word. So you can choose which one of those you'd like to explore, but that's from what I've seen off the top.
It sounds from your description, Aidan, and there's so much there for people that it's kind of scaffolding. It's one on top of the other. And I think from what you've described, I've been a long-term believer that, you build confidence by repeatedly keeping promises to yourself and obviously externally to other people. But it sounds like lack of clarity is the foundation of that the other 2 don't really matter, because if you end up keeping promises yourself, you just end up getting to the wrong place quicker if you're not clear on where you need to go. Unpack the clarity from us, and how would somebody who's struggling for confidence get more clarity? Now, again, I know it's a very loaded question and potentially a million different ways you could go with it, but from your experience in 15 years plus working with people who struggle with clarity to build confidence, what would you suggest is their first 0 to 1 step?
I always say now more than ever, awareness is the key to everything. And it's not just for confidence. It's really to free ourselves from all mental and emotional burden. The problem is people try to change behaviors first, Brian, and then they fail. It doesn't work like that. You have to change the identity first. You have to change the self-image first. You have to change the programming. And then even then people try and go in and change the programming, which I used to always do. Like, let me teach you these skills to how to think and how to speak and how to see yourself differently. But it's ultimately wallpapering over the cracks. The first thing is an awareness. It's to ask some new questions. That's why I love coaching. That's why I became a coach. And there's a lot of negative connotation around the word coach. That's why I don't identify as a life coach or anything like that, because of that connotation. It limits, and it affects people's perception. But the modality of coaching is asking questions, because the truth is we have the answers within ourselves. I always say to people, like, I don't have the answers for you, but I definitely have the questions to guide you, to bring it out. And questions are the answer. The right question is always the answer. So to get clarity, it's about, first of all, creating space for yourself on a daily, weekly basis. If something isn't primary in your brain, you notice yourself, it gets deleted and distorted, right? We have to make things primary. That's why we have to become obsessed. It's funny that obsession was such a negative word for us growing up. And now we understand to get anything done, we have to be a bit obsessed about it, right? But it's about being obsessed with the right things. When that's primary for us and it's clear, then we can create change. But if we don't make time for it, if we don't set an intention, John Maxwell, famous leadership guy, hundreds of books written, he says everything worthwhile is uphill. It has to be intentional. So first of all, and that's one of the things I admire when people, get coaching or they join a group coaching program that I do, is you're creating space every week for yourself. Everybody, I'd say, should be a student of themselves. Like, when's the last time you created space to be a student of yourself? That when you're exploring, that's when you find the answers. That's where clarity comes. But most people don't create the space for themselves. They don't have the intention. Never mind what questions to ask. They don't even put themselves in a position to receive anything from their higher self or from the world around them, because they're in distraction mode. They're in need mode. They're in external mode. So the first thing is awareness, setting an intention that I want to create space for me. I want to become a student of myself. I want to explore me, life, the universe, my world, who I am. Start there first. Curiosity leads to clarity. Listen about that. That's the key. Be curious. Like I always say, I don't know where I heard this. I heard it a long time ago, and I wish I could remember, because I love to credit things when I can. But it said, the more conclusions you make, the less alive you become. And we're always making conclusions. So you have to be curious to get clarity. So when you're curious, you get clarity. When you have clarity, you get confidence. And that's why this stuff is so simple, really, once we know the direction. And again, having someone external like a coach or a mentor allows us to elevate up from our current view and see things from a new perspective. So the last thing I'll say on that is I describe it as like going down a hill in a sled when it snows. If you keep going down the same way in the sled the whole time, eventually the snow gets so up either side you can't turn left or right. You're in the same groove in the snow all the time. That's our thoughts. That's our emotional patterns and behaviors. So having a coach or mentor or something to elevate you up out of that groove, so now you can see different routes, different paths to take. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I love that line, curiosity leads to clarity. And I couldn't agree more with that. I think the problem with distraction mode and the problem with getting clarity in general is it feels so difficult in the beginning. Now, the upside of it is I liken it a lot, and you know this, Aidan, as someone who's big into fitness, it's very similar to joining the gym or joining a fitness program first. It's very difficult in the beginning, but after a while you become addicted and you end up seeking it out, and that self-awareness becomes nearly a positive addiction, where you're checking back in and you're bringing everything back to you, again, not to steal from your book and steal from your language, but you're bringing everything back to you effectively. Exactly. But with distraction mode, to keep it very practical for people, because there's definitely people listening, and when I think of how I ask questions sometimes, I always revert back to my 25-year-old self, 26-year-old self, and distraction was something that I knew I was doing, but I couldn't really break that habit or break that mold or break that routine. For someone that's listening in, or someone that you'd be working with from your years of experience, what would you say for them to get out of that distraction mode? Obviously, creating that space is going to be one, but distraction is something that even if you decide you're creating the space, you can come back to your normal environment and then something distracts you and then you're back into these old thought patterns. What would you say in terms of setting up systems over willpower, or setting up potential things in their environment that could help them, for someone who's struggling with that distraction mode?
So that's a great question. Again, one of the first things, so after the client is in, they've created a space, right? Because we schedule things out in advance. The first activity they have, I call them success steps or back to you steps, is to create a vision. It's shocked me over the years, especially as I worked with more and more successful people. You know, I have a lot of senior level clients, people, executives, big companies, hundreds of millions a year, and they've no vision. They got on the ladder and they stay on the ladder and they're linear focused on step after step, but they've no big vision. And most people, I would say, don't have a vision. Everyone talks about achieving goals and all that. For me, it's about what's the vision of the sole purpose of life is living, right? So it's not about having a goal of a 10K and achieving it and then never running again. It's not about anything, being positive for a while, getting up early for a while. It's about how do I want to live every day? So one of the first things that I do with clients is I have them design a day in their life 3, 4, or 5 years from now. I say, how do you want to wake up? What's your ritual going to look like? Who's waking up next to you? What's that relationship like? What does your day look like? How much work? Literally design your life. And the key about a vision, and a proper vision, is when you get into it, it has to move you emotionally. So I always say your vision should be clear. It should be specific. Detailed, again, so the brain can seek it out. But the most important part is emotionally charged. The challenge is people have all these mental ideas of, I think, I want this, I want, but it's superficial, it's shallow. What's in your heart and what's in your body, that's the key. Because your body is present. Your mind is judging the past and is anticipating the future. Your heart is the only thing that's present in this moment. So when you feel something, it makes you shiver, it makes you emotional, it makes you cry even. That's a vision of your future that's for you. And I believe if your vision is in your heart and it moves you emotionally, it's already yours on a certain level. And that's a different kind of conversation, a different level of awareness. We can talk about it another time, but the vision has to be clear, specific, and emotionally charged. And then the part 2 of that then is the actual visualization of this. And this is where a lot of people fall short. And we know now from a neuroscience point of view that actually if we engage all senses in visual, like the brain doesn't know what's real and what's not, as we know, right? But even people who are not into neuroscience know this when they watch something on Netflix or at the movies and they see this emotional response. It's very simple to tell. But when you get into your vision and you can touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it, hear it, you can imagine people in your life, how they speak about you in this life. You imagine all sorts of things around that life and you feel it and you really engage all of your senses. That changes your feeling now. So, before actions come feelings. So when you feel like going to the gym, you go to the gym. When you feel like making a sales call, you make a sales call. When you feel like doing something, you do it. So before actions come feelings. So if we can create time as part of the daily rituals we do, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, especially when the brain waves are slower in theta, and we say, okay, let me get into visualization, deep levels of visualization where I feel it in my body. That changes the feeling now. Now I'm choosing different. I'm choosing from that place. So one of my lines, and it's in the book, I always say, I'm saying this for years to my clients, don't think of your future. Think from your future. So you don't think of it. We think from it. We go there, not just in the mind, in the body. And we pull it back into the now and we choose from that place now. And that's why it's already ours. It's already there. We just have to allow us, and we have to remove all the blocks from getting it. And that's the key. That's the only way to get past distraction, because that's something that's going to pull you. Because me as a young entrepreneur, when I went out as an entrepreneur in 2010, 25, it's a push. I always describe it like I was swimming against a current. I was pushing uphill. You don't want to push and push and push. It's exhausting. You want to be pulled by a vision. A vision is what pulls you. And I feel that now with this whole back to you movement. I'm being pulled every day. That's what we're looking for. And people say, how do I find that? Back to what we said, clarity, questions, curiosity. And that's the most important things for every single person, every client I have. That's day one.
I think there's so much crossover there, from what you do as a career to romantic relationships to your fitness to your health. What's pulling you? as opposed to what are you being pushed to do. I'm very curious because you mentioned emotionally charged, and this is something that, as you were speaking, connected with me. So I'm processing this in real time. So apologies if this isn't clear for people. But something that I instantly thought of there was when I'm setting goals for myself, Aidan, I have to, sometimes I'll set a goal and go, well, I want to do this race, or I want to do this in business, but I don't get any emotional charge from it. And inevitably, as you were speaking, I'm like, all the goals that I've fallen off track with are the things that I haven't been emotionally charged with. And I wanted to pull it out for people that, from a personal example, as I said, I'm processing it in real time, that you need to have that emotional charge, that feeling on the front end before you set a goal, because inevitably that's the thing that's going to push you through. Would you say when someone is setting a goal for themselves, whether that is to get body fat to a certain level, or whether that's to have the courage to go after a career they want, or whether that's asking out that person that they're attracted to, because a lot of that comes back to internal self-confidence, but that's again a domain-dependent thing. I know some people are confident in some areas and not in others, but would you say that checking in with that emotional charge on the front end and using that helps you? Or what would your process be, or what would your advice be for somebody who has the self-doubt within themselves? And I know something you've talked about a lot about is that self-doubt leads to self-sabotage. But for those who struggle, because confidence and self-doubt are, you know, nearly two sides of an opposite spectrum, but they're different. Someone struggling with that self-doubt, how would you recommend they overcome that? As I said, just I'm picking out of the air that maybe having an emotional charge in the front end could help, but I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Sure. Well, it's funny because for years I've been, like I was saying to you, and I've been teaching skills to add on for years, how to think and how to reprogram the self-image. And I have a program, Ascension, for that. But I had a bit of an awakening over the last few months myself, and I realized it's not so much about adding on anymore and covering up. It's really about letting go. So one of the big things, I've been doing this a lot over the last few months with my clients, was always part of it, but now it's become way more primary, is like when you have that self-doubt, it's to really bring it to the forefront, into the light. And how we do that is we start just by being the observer, by being the witness. So again, coming back, a lot of people try to change and then they can't, so they give up. It's like when people are 10 minutes late, the class is an hour, they're 10 minutes late, so they don't go to the class. They give up an hour because they missed 10 minutes. It doesn't actually make sense, but it's just in our mind, right? So that happens as well with, well, I tried to reprogram my mind, didn't work, so now I just throw it out the window altogether. So what we do now is awareness is key. Like we want to bring everything up into the front. And energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed or transmuted. So one of the things I do, and I did it with my group guys last night, is I said for the next week, so I have something called the circle of limiting beliefs. And you have a huge circle on a blank page and you have limiting beliefs inside. And for the next week, every thought you have that stops you from doing anything, you ask yourself, is that a limiting belief? And if so, you put it into the limiting belief circle. And what happens is you realize is that circle is like a scarf around people's eyes. That's actually preventing them from seeing, not even getting or receiving, just even seeing what's there for them. So we want to bring the awareness up, and the observer part is key, because whatever about writing it down, that's just a practical step to get them into action. But I want them really starting to look at these thoughts, where the mind goes. I want you to look at it. I want you to observe it. I don't want you to judge it, because that's a different thing. So it really takes time for some people, like repetition, as you know, to get. Some clients get it quickly, and sometimes we have to repeat it and go over it for a while. But what happens is once we start pulling back, zooming out and observing, this energy starts to shift by itself, because the attachment isn't feeding it anymore. Because most of the cycles of thought, the emotional responses, are unconscious. We're in reaction mode all the time. And this is me. This is my identity. But when I can become the witness for a while and just observe it, I'm like, that's not actually me. Or I start to question that. That's not actually true at all. So that's again, so just zooming out and seeing that and observing it just allows it to kind of shift the energy by itself. You don't even have to go and do anything. That's a lot of the work people, and I realize that now, is they're trying to change it like this, and it's a struggle, it's a civil war inside the head. It's a battle. Let's just observe it first. Can you do that? Okay, I can do that. And then that space between it creates separation from that thought and who I am. Now I realize that's not me. So if I realize that's not me, now it doesn't have as much power over me, and I'm not crushed by that doubt and that insecurity. Now we can start implementing steps to actually change that, because we've plugged out the source of power, which was me being unconscious and identifying it as me.
I love that. That's such a great example of like getting over that initial self-doubt. And I'm going to follow it on with probably even a more difficult question, but I know this is an area that you're very good with, so I think there's going to be a lot of value here based on what you even said about self-doubt. But self-sabotage, I always think of self-sabotage, it's not completely dissimilar to self-doubt. It's normally you've got moving. When I think of the analogy of 0 to 1, getting up and running, that stops a lot of people. There's the initial self-doubt, they don't even get going. They've missed the 10 minutes and they missed the hour because they've missed the 10 minutes of class, to use your example. But self-sabotage feels like somebody going to the class 30 minutes in and then be like, you know what, no, fuck it, I'm out of this. No, I'm not doing this. I'm not ready to hear this. And they fall off track, and they're not going from 0 to 1. They're trying to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, but they're falling off in between.
Exactly, yeah.
Why do you think people struggle so much with self-sabotage? And this, again, can be in so many facets of life, from relationships to diets to programs to business. But why do you think, Aidan, so many people struggle with self-sabotage?
Again, it comes back to not knowing who we really are and what got us to where we are. One of the chapters in my book is called Loving the Parts of Yourself You Don't Like. And the reason being is a lot of these traits we have, which we judge ourselves, we waste so much energy in judging instead of just being aware and learning and healing from it. We have all these parts of our personality. What people don't understand is the parts of yourself you don't like that reaction. Like, why do you always get angry? Why do I always get sad? Why do I always quit? Why do I start and stop? That's all triggered by something in here down low that was created at a time when you needed it. So I'm going to set a lot of people free today and really take a lot of weight off the shoulders, because those parts of yourself you don't like, they were there when you were vulnerable, when you were scared, when you didn't get the love you needed or you wanted, or you weren't heard. And there's such a discomfort in the body. And our brain, as you know, cares about survival. It cares about saving energy. So it says, I don't like this feeling. So the mind creates a reaction. It creates a story. It creates a protection against that. Now, when that doesn't get addressed, or when a person isn't self-aware enough to heal and pull out of that, and they get more into this life, or maybe their environment keeps them to a certain degree. Now, I believe we're all responsible at some point to get out, but for sure environment can help or hinder that. And it becomes more and more locked in. I always say that's why some people are assholes and some people are bitches, because they've been asleep for so long, because they've never gotten out of that paradigm. So to a certain point, it's not their fault, because again, they were, and you get, the amazing thing is, as you become more self-aware, you do the work on yourself and you see people, and whereas before you might have judged and reacted, now you can see their pain. Like for me, I can see why that happened, why they are. And that's why I get such amazing results with clients, is you can see that. They have no idea, but you can see it. And from your own business, when you meet someone, have a consultation, exactly what's going on, right? That's the great thing, is like people get such freedom knowing that, okay, maybe I don't need to be so hard on myself anymore. And then again, when we question, where did that come from? Why was it there? That creates a separation, like before, from it. So now I'm not that anymore. Now now I know where that came from. I don't need that. I can let that go. And that's how we begin to free. That's why I said freeing ourselves of mental and emotional burden. It all starts here. And I think it's such a gift to give people, which they give themselves ultimately, to love the parts of yourself you don't like, to say thank you to them. So I have my clients say thank you for their shit. Thank you for their struggles. Because I always say your chaos is your communication. Your chaos is your communication. All the chaos you're going through is telling you something. We just need to shift perspective. And that's the beautiful thing. Let's elevate you up out of where you are, and let's see really what it means, where it comes from, and how we can use that. Does that answer the question?
Oh, it does. And I know in your book, which at the time of recording isn't available, but it will be if you're listening back, and I'll go back and add it to the show notes for people to listen to. And it's early on in the book where you talk about your ultimate freedom, which again gives a nice little nugget of where you could potentially go with that in terms of changing people's perspectives and their biggest problem, which I might come back to. But you also, based on that, giving people that freedom, it ties in nicely with the part of the book I wanted to pull out, where you talk about being enough. I am enough is the name of the chapter. And this is something definitely selfishly and personally I struggled with the most in my 20s. That constant lack, scarcity, having to achieve external things, go, do, for whatever reason that was driving me. Things that were protective mechanisms at one point stopped serving me as I got older. But talk about that I am enough, because I think when we think ultimate freedom and we think fulfillment and happiness. Some of us will go to external. I need to do X, Y, and Z to feel this, which in my experience is a broken mindset and a broken viewpoint. But talk to us about the importance of the language, I am enough.
So everything, even just before the language or beyond the language, everything that we are seeking, like when we talk about clarity at the beginning, like what do I want is a great question. Like, why don't people know what they want? Because they have it. Because we are it. Because there's nothing more. There's nothing on this earth that can fulfill you, that's deep-rooted enough to truly fulfill you. Nothing. No clothes, no house, no car, no person, no relationship, nothing. There's nothing deep-rooted enough to fulfill you on a deep level. You know, so one of the phrases I've become kind of known for is I always say the kingdom we are seeking is in our heart. Like, we have it. I've been lucky enough to have some experiences to feel that, to really feel that. There's nothing external that can give us more power and more love and more light than inside of ourselves. The challenge, say, like I say, in this world today, the world keeps us in distraction mode. It wants us in need mode and spend mode. Because if you're self-aware and you're in alignment with your highest self, and you know you are full and complete and you need nothing, because let me tell the listeners, the real you needs nothing. Like, I do this for years with my clients. They write the word need and they put a big X through it. Like, first of all, you don't need to do anything. You want to do. Like, I do a lot on conscious language empowerment because we're so casual with our language. We're always building walls in front of us with our thoughts and with our words. So you don't need, you want. So let go of need. But in actuality, you need nothing. Like, you need sleep, food, water, and oxygen. Everything else after that's a luxury. Right? You don't need a person. You don't have to get this. You don't have to watch this. You don't have to talk about that. It's all illusion. The world wants you in need mode and spend mode, because if you're not in those modes and you're fully in your power, instead of watching Netflix or watching Love Island or whatever the show is, maybe you want to go for a walk in nature. Instead of scrolling on your phone, maybe you want to sit and breathe and stretch. Maybe. Now, to some people, including to me for most of my life, I always said, I don't want to sit because again, I was in the illusion of I need this. I have to be stimulated by this. I'm in distraction mode. So I am enough is about people pulling, and that's the whole concept of the book, back to me. How do I get back to me? Because all of the misery comes from the mind. Because the mind is always in need mode, get mode, have mode. And it's illusion. It's complete illusion. And the funny thing is, once you get back to you and you realize I am enough, I have everything, and you have clarity, you're better at everything else in your life. You're better at your job. You're better in your relationships. You're more pleasure to be around. You help more people. Everything changes. So when you get into a state of non-need, you choose now. Like, so now when you're in a relationship, I choose you and you choose me. Most people are in a relationship because they're getting fed in a way they can't feed themselves because they don't love themselves. Why don't you love yourself? Because you don't know yourself. Because you think you are who you think you are, but you're not who you think you are, and who you actually are two different people. So if you don't know yourself, you can't love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, you're seeking other people to give you that food that you can't give yourself, that love you can't give yourself. So the whole I am enough thing is bringing people's awareness back to them, to realize they are everything. They have everything because they have it. They don't need, and it's just we're so distracted. We're so outside of ourselves. We don't know the power. And you've experienced this even on your runs and on your extreme events. When you get into that isness of I call it just isness. You're just in it. There's no thought. There's no illusion. There's no suffering. It's just in that state. You're full. You need nothing. And the more and more we explore ourselves, we start to find that. It's there. It's always there for us. It's always trying to get to us. But it's our mind is always pulling us outside because the world is pulling us away. Because we're hard to control if we're in this oneness. We're hard to control. We don't need as much. We don't buy as much. We don't scroll as much. When we're out here away from ourselves, we need all those things. So that's kind of the idea of I am enough is just a kind of a continuation from a verbal point of view of back to me. And it's just I am enough is about declaring that. And I call them power statements. You know, people call them affirmations or mantras, but it's all about power. Like obsession, there's a lot of negative connotation around power, but we have way more power than everyone or anyone wants us to have. And that power is from the heart. It's not from the ego or the mind. So
I agree that empowering people and the language I'm enough is something that we work in different fields, but I've worked with people over the years who've fallen on that disordered eating spectrum. Now, I don't work with people with eating disorders. There's better people out there, professionals who can serve that community better than I can. But I have, and I had one of my girls actually recently in a program who sent me her before photos, her photos from starting the program with all her goals and how much weight she wanted to lose, and her photo looked like an after photo from a program. She was in such good shape, and she was like, I hate my legs, I hate my stomach, need to get my shoulders bigger. And I was like, oh my God. And I spent the whole time, yes, helping her with nutrition and training and all that, but it was mindset. And one of the mantras, I was like, every morning I want you to repeat 10 times in the mirror, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. And it was rewiring her mindset, because
the repetition, right? You need the repetition. The brain needs it.
And the problem with the brain is, like you said, that scarf around your eyes, you can't always see what everybody else sees. Yeah. And again, I'm a victim of this more than anything. I've got my own blind spots, and I've got a great people around me who help me illuminate some of those uncomfortable blind spots, unfortunately. But it gives me a nice little tie on to something else you covered on Instagram, and the importance about keeping a small circle. And this is something that I have been living and have been a huge fan of quietly for the past 6, 7, 8, 9 years. But I haven't spoken too much about it on the podcast. But I'm curious to hear and get your version of how helpful that can be as somebody who's living proof and as a living example. Because when I was watching the video, I was just nodding my head as you were speaking on that video on keeping your small circle. I'm like, you've nailed it, Aidan. Talk to us about the importance of keeping a small circle.
Again, it's just influence. I do an example when I'm at a live event, and it was again a mentor of mine did it first, so I stole it from him. But it's like if you're walking, and I bring a client up and I say, walk straight down to the end of the room. And I just put one finger on their shoulder. I could just, they're over in the far corner by the end of it. And it's such a visual, simple kind of representation of the message. And then I do like a baby finger, and I'm barely touching them, but they don't get to the end. They end up over there. Then we get 5 people up around and say, okay, now try, and there's 5 of us moving you over that way. No chance. And then we play in the picture of like your dream goal is here, but your avoidance behavior, distraction, temptations pulling you here. And then the 5 people move you this way. And people are like, holy shit, like this is so obvious, right? And everyone talks about, you become the average of the people you spend time with. But again, we're so casual with our thoughts now. We're consuming so much, and it's hard to control because there's so much coming. We're very casual with what we allow in. And I always say it's very hard. I had this last night with a client. She asked me, some of these people are my family. I can't just cut them out. So I always used to say disassociate. Now I say, can you limit association? Can you remove yourself? Because if you play soccer with Ronaldo for 6 months, you're going to be better at soccer no matter how bad you are. If you surf with one of the best surfers, you're going to be better at surf, even if you've never been to water in your life. Like the impact of what's around us all the time is so powerful. It's one thing to have a mastermind and to have a group moving towards a direction, but just for your energy, just for your day-to-day conversations, what are the topics? Like when you and me talk, we're talking about ideas, concepts, visions, creative. Like you want to be, it's not competitive, it's creative. You want to feed that because like what we said earlier, your brain focuses on what's primary. So what's primary for you? And keeping a small circle. I have one funny thing kind of with all my clients, and it started with a couple of female clients because it's for fellas too, of course, but there's a lot of females who are in these WhatsApp groups and they have all these groups of girls, and I say everyone has to leave at least one WhatsApp group when they work with me because there's just so much crap and distraction. It's all distraction again, So I believe in keeping a small circle. I think you have to, again, when you're outside yourself, you think you need to be in that circle. FOMO. I need to be at that event. I need to hear what they're talking about. You don't. And that circle is moving you towards, again, from my point of view now, they're moving away from your real self or back to you. And I'm very lucky. I know a lot of people living around the world, traveling, but my circle's small, and the conversations in that time, like you said, they're tough conversations. Like people who call you out, people who look, but also they're smart enough people, and everyone has these that they say, I want you to get objective guidance, objective help. You can only listen to your friends and circle so much because the problem is they love you and they want what's best for you. But you don't know what's best for you yet, so they definitely don't know. So ultimately it comes back to being responsible amongst yourself. But again, how can I create a circle? How can I create a situation where I give myself the best chance of fulfillment, the best chance of success? And again, I think when people go back to themselves, they realize I don't need to be in that group. And I have it all the time. They say, I'm so glad I left. I've but it took me 6 months to leave it, but it's not serving you. If it's not moving, when you get clear in your vision, they don't align, I limit association there. If they align with that vision that you created, perfect, keep them in the circle. But again, people don't have a vision, so they leave everyone around. They're casual with who's around. They're casual with the talking and the language because they don't know where they're going anyway. So again, it all comes back to clarity. It all comes back to the vision. Who are you? And then choosing the right pieces that just make your life good at that point.
Yeah, I think myself and a lot of people listening have definitely been through that scenario. It reminds me of the quote, I think it's from a song that, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Fall for anything, yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those, you have to bring awareness to the circle and the people you're spending the most time with. As somebody, and this is a kind of a side tangent, but I think it ties in nicely with what you said there. I remember when I left my teaching job first, Aidan, I had a family member at a wedding after I told her I was leaving primary school teaching, which I was working as for 4 years, to become a quote unquote personal trainer, to work in a gym is what the family and people had said. And I remember her calling me an absolute idiot for it. And I held that like a weighted vest for years. Now, it was very serving. I think fire and negativity is a very hot burning fuel. It can light up your house or it can burn the fucking thing down. But something I realize now in my mid-30s, looking back, that was coming from a very loving place. That was coming from a place of their scarcity, their fear for me. Yeah. And it's so funny because that's how family members and friends can be. They normally, in most cases, want what's best for you, even if that's not what's true for you. And I think that's an important distinguishment to make. If somebody's listening to this, Aidan, who's struggling with a mother, father, brother, sister, cousin, auntie, uncle, particularly family members, because I think this is the most difficult in terms of removal, what would you say for people who can't physically remove themselves from that environment or from those people?
Yeah, I'm going to give you definitely a nice little soundbite here. One of the things that has become, that people love when I say it, but I do this on my programs with clients, and we call it divorcing your parents. And it's just an energetic thing, to really be able to let go. Like, again, getting back to yourself. Like, everyone has an inner child that needs to be healed and loved, and most of our problems come from there, right? But we have such this bond, this ongoing connection and a guilt connected with our parents and our family and who we should be and who we are in their eyes. Our brain never wants to act in a way that's not congruent with our beliefs because we feel crazy. So that's why when people are in college and they're known for something, and then let's say they don't drink and then they go out and they get drunk, everyone talks about it like it was so out of character. But maybe that's the real them coming out. You don't know, right? So it's like that when you're in a family and then everyone in the family does this path, or you did this for a while, and then all of their beliefs and attitude supports you in that position. And then for years, it gets to a point now, more and more people are having it, and I think the last 2 years awoke that's not me. But everyone, this weight is on me, this expectation to be this is on me. So again, it comes back to getting clear on getting back to you. That's why I said to my podcast, my book, Back to You, it has to be back to you. And the divorcing our parents thing is an exercise we do where we literally go back, we find these moments and we cut those cords and we clear that energy and we say thank you and we let it go. Now, it might take repetition because a lot of things, I always say it takes more than a couple of conversations and meditations to heal decades of programs. People think it can just be like this. It can't. So in one instance, you're already healed because you are that. But in another instance, you have time to spend to undo some of the programming and the layers. But the first thing is setting the attention, acknowledging that you are enough again, that you are everything that you need. And what happens when you do divorce the parents, and people get the wrong idea until they sit down and actually listen, it allows you to have a way better relationship. It allows you to love them in another level. And if it comes to uncles and aunts, brothers, sisters and cousins, you just have to limit association. You have to have boundaries. You have to create a schedule that's keeping you in a place where you're not being influenced. And a lot of clients struggle with that. The sister's kid's birthday was this weekend, and I'm the godmother, and I have to go and spend time, and I have to listen to that all day. There's a lot of that peer pressure. A lot of women now, especially with the last couple of years, women who are really ambitious and business owners and driven, and they're in their masculine of achieving, and then they miss out on some of the feminine, or they don't give themselves the time maybe for that feminine side. And I have clients like that, over the last couple of years, and now they feel that pressure of like they have the career success, but maybe they don't have the family or whatever else. And they have that battle as well of, well, every time I'm with my cousin's house or my parents' house, all the talk is about that. And then all my friends have kids and all my friends. And that's a real issue these days. Because, you know, a lot of females want a career, but they also want that. And it's hard enough to get ourselves right. But if we're being influenced by friends, family, and a circle and a WhatsApp group full of opinions, we have no chance. But again, it comes back to, let's get clarity. Let's create some space for you. Let's find your truth. And then once we start from there, it's easier to separate from all that other distraction. But if you don't have clarity, you get lost and you'll always swim in that every weekend, every week, every Christmas. And you'll never get out of that. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but...
It's really helpful though. And I think what I hear from that too is... once you get clarity, you're able to disconnect from some of that noise. And what happens, and the example I've used on the past with my own example, and not to pull this back onto me, but with confidence, I always use the analogy of legs on a table, that if you only have a small leg on a table, it's very easy to knock it, i.e. your confidence. But the more time you keep those promises to yourself and say you're going to do something, you do it, you add these small legs to your table, and then it becomes more sturdy. And confidence is like that. At the beginning of something, when you're not clear on what you should be doing, it's very easy to have self-doubt, to have confidence, to be able to knock off and have all this noise infiltrate. But when you get past a certain point and you're so clear on what you should be doing, who you should be doing it with, that noise is extraneous. It just becomes, it's out there. So for example, like we are both in the online space with social media and a presence, but very little of any negativity comes in my direction because I'm so clear on what my purpose is on social media. Try and make it more positive, try and serve people, try and provide value, and staying on top of that. And then if something does come in, it's normally because I'm like, oh shit, they're right. They're right. You are being like this, or you are incorrect on what you said. And then there's feedback on how you can potentially improve. And I've got one final question that I want to ask, and I'm very curious because I didn't prep you for it. And as somebody that thinks you're putting out incredible work, and we've had several conversations, we've met up several times, and it's something I'm curious about. But before we do that, for people that want to pick up the book, particularly off the back of this, it'll be out, if you're listening to this live, it'll be out in the next few weeks, the next month. But there's the website, theaidanobrien.com, Instagram page, official, Aidan O'Brien official. You'll have all the details on there. But is there any links that you want to give people, or links to the book in before we get on to the last question? If you do, please do that now.
I mean, Instagram is a great way to connect with me. At the website also, the Aidan O'Brien. And the AidanO'Brien.com is kind of funny because, you know, there's another Aidan O'Brien in Ireland. Some people might have heard of him. And so he was always, are you related to the Aidan O'Brien? And I was like, no, he's no relation to me. So I always like the Aidan O'Brien. I'm like, no, I'm the Aidan O'Brien. So that's why my website now is theaidanobrien.com. And also because he had AidanO'Brien.com taken. So by the time I got around to it. But no, the website's there. The book will be, fingers crossed, early Jan, and they'll be able to get it through the website or on Instagram. And my own podcast is called Back to You with Aidan O'Brien, where there's all this kind of stuff that we're talking about today. But yeah, Instagram or the website's perfectly fine. And like I said to you, I'll put a link there. If anyone wants to book a call and directly have a chat, you know, just to get a bit of further clarity, I'm happy to do that. We'll put that link there as well for them.
Amazing. And I will link those in the show notes for people on BrianKeaneFitness.com and in the description for today's podcast. But Aidan, the final question I want to ask, you've been doing great work with people, over 250,000 people over the last 15 years and longer on yourself. But I'm curious, with everything that you know now, what's something that you know now that you wish you had known when you started off first?
It's funny, I've been thinking about that question recently, actually, because even when, like, one of the programs I created was for that younger me, but I've had such a shift over the last couple of months in terms of not adding on, but letting go. I think it's, you know, if I knew how to let go, like for me, the word awakening means, it came to me in this way, letting go of everything that you're not. And in our 20s and early 30s, there's such a struggle of who am I, who am I really? If I could have learned that earlier, if I could have let go of everything that I'm not. And I think I'm very lucky. I found my passion very young. I was a personal trainer like yourself, running gyms in Limerick. That's how I started. 2009, I went working on cruise ships, and I was teaching seminars to 4,000 guests every week. And so I was at 23 on stage to literally thousands of people every week. And I knew that was where I belonged. And even when I was doing health and wellness talks, it always kind of went into a mindset and everything. So I've been a student of this and exploring this for many years. So I was very lucky. I found quite young, you know, my way. And in 2010, when I became an entrepreneur, that what I learned building those businesses and building myself as an entrepreneur, all the skills I learned, that's what makes me how I am today and how I can speak. I always say it's not what I do anymore, it's who I am. So I don't have to remember or be prepared for anything because it's just who I am. So there's not much I would change, to be honest, because everything that's sharpened me. All that work, all that failure, the success, to thousands of meetings, speaking all over the world. But just being able to sooner, I guess, let go of everything that we're not and understand that everything we were seeking, the attachment, and we could do a whole podcast on attachment, right? But everything from whether it's relationships with girls, like what I was getting, if I knew that sooner, things I was chasing business-wise, if I knew why I was, because I didn't know how to give it to myself, I didn't know what I was missing. If I could find that earlier, it would have saved a lot of time, heartache, all of that. But one thing I'll say to finish is, and it's a chapter in the book, you can't be found if you don't get lost. And everything is perfect. Like, that's the message. Like, even though, I would have loved to have been able to, avoid some of that feeling or some of that heartache, everything had to happen perfectly to get me to where I am right now. Everything. And I believe we chose all of that to get there. And the good thing is, if you have an awareness, we can get there sooner. If we're asleep longer, it takes longer, but I believe we're going to get there. So for me, I'll leave that for everyone, is that you can't be found if you don't get lost. So again, your chaos is your communication. Say thank you. Ask questions. Be curious. What can I take from it? What can I get? What's it telling me? And trust. People always say trust God, trust the universe, but trust yourself, because you are those things too. So I think that's my answer for that.
Aidan, what a wonderful way to finish. There's literally nothing I can add to that. My friend, thank you so much for your time, for the value you're providing people on here, through the book, through online, through your speaking. Mate, keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Dude, I appreciate you having me on, and let's be honest here, that book, it's coming out so soon because of you, because of that push, that support from you. When we first met and had a conversation, it was just an idea I wanted to do it. It was part of the plan. I'd started it, but really and talk about having a small circle and the right people around, your encouragement and saying, come on, because speaking wise, you said, come on, let's get it moving. And with the podcast to talk about it, I want to say thank you for that support and that friendship, because that's been a real inspiration to me in what you're doing. And your humility with your success is also inspiring to me. So thank you. And I look forward to having you on my podcast as well soon. Not as big as yours now, but we'll get there. We have to start somewhere,
100%, man. Thank you so much for the kind words. And as soon as you were telling me about the book, and I know the value and how many people you've helped, it's one of those that I could feel it, because when I wrote Rewire Your Mindset, that's a book that if I had died tomorrow and hadn't written it, I would have massive regrets. And I could see that in you. I was like, you need to get this out there, Aidan. So I'm so glad that it's there. It'll be available for people, and it's going to transform so many lives. So mate, thank you so much for writing it, and thank you so much again for the awesome words. Thanks. And I'll chat to you real soon.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
There you have it. Mindset coach Aidan O'Brien on building confidence, why self-doubt leads to self-sabotage, and the importance of keeping a small inner circle. Absolutely love this conversation. As I said at the top of the podcast, I actually ended up getting some nuggets of gold myself that I had to process in real time during the interview, and I hope you got some too. As always, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a rating and a review. That massively helps the podcast in terms of growth and being able to bring on more guests who can help you and serve you with your mindset, health, fitness, and nutrition. That's all from me from this week. Catch you all next Monday.